At this time, would all sergeants please start their recordings?
PC recording has started.
Thank you.
All recording started.
Thank you.
Backup is rolling.
Thank you. Sergeant Polite.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the remote hearing on the Committee on Transportation. Will all council members and staff please turn on their videos at this time? Thank you. To minimize disruption, please place all cell phones, electronics to vibrate. You may send your testimony at testimony@council.nyc.gov. That's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chairs, we are ready to begin.
Thank you, Sergeant. Good morning, and thank you all for joining our hearing today on moped and electrical scooters. I am Dani Rodriguez, Chairman of the Transportation Committee. First, I'm going to turn it over to our committee counsel to go over some procedure, including to recognize the council member that has joined the hearing today.
Thank you. I'm Elliot Lynn, counsel to the Transportation Committee of the New York City Council. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you're called on to testify, at which time you will be unmuted by the host. Please listen for your name to be called. I will be periodically announcing who the next panelists will be. The first panelist will be from the administration. First, from the Department of Transportation, Commissioner Polly Trottenberg, Assistant Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, Rebecca Zach, Senior Director for Special Projects, Will Carey, and Executive Director for the Bike Share Program, John Frost. And from NYPD, we also have Deputy Chief Michael Pilecki and the Managing Attorney for the Legislative Affairs Unit, Michael Clark. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question, please use the Zoom raise hand function and I will call on you in order. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes. Please also note that for ease of this virtual hearing, we will not be allowing a second round of questioning. Thank you. Chair Rodriguez.
Thank you. Thank you, Elliot. I also want to recognize that we've been joined by council member Reynoso, Cabrera, Diaz, Holden, Coot, Levin, Levin, Menchaca, Miller, Rose, and I think that I have all of my colleagues there. Give me 1 second, please. Thank you again, Elliot. And today the committee will conduct an oversight hearing on share moped and electrical scooters. The committee will also consider intro number 2061, which I have a sponsor in together with other colleagues in relation to the Department of Transportation's approval for share moped organizations. This hearing follows up on the work that the committee has done over the past year and a half related to electrical scooters and electrical bikes. In June, we passed a package of bill that legalized certain type of electrical scooters and e-bike in the city. We also passed Local Law 74, sponsored by my colleague, Councilmember Cabrera, to create a pilot program for share electrical scooter. I'm proud to have worked with Speaker Johnson and the other colleagues at the council on this legislative body to get this law passed in order to give New Yorkers the opportunity to utilize increased mode of alternative transportation, especially during this time of COVID-19 pandemic. We also work very close with the administration and Commissioner Trump. Moped or limited use motorcycle, as they are classified by the New York State Department of Motor Vehicle, offer riders an additional mode of transportation. Since moped can be registered with the Department of Motor Vehicle, they are legal based on what the DMV have established then to ride on our street as long as riders meet certain criteria and observe certain rules of the road. depending on the class of mop they are driving. But let's be clear, New York City is the one that has the power to authorize any corporation to put moped in the street of New York City. NYC, the company will operate, in New York City, the company will operate a shared electrical moped service. Rivers and mopeds are through 30 miles per hour for safety reasons, and riders are required to wear helmets. They are also not allowed to ride on bike lane or sidewalk. Again, anyone riding a moped must use a helmet all the time, and none of them should be allowed to be in the sidewalk or in a bike lane. And I hope to hear how strictly it's going to be from now on, so that, this is not against Rebel, but any company that allow a single rider to use one of those mopeds without helmets at any second or in the sidewalk, they should not be allowed to do business in our city. So far this year, there have been a number of crashes involving Rebel, including 4 that have ended in fatalities. That's unacceptable. Just a few days ago, Homa Schnicker, an 82 years old senior, was struck by a rider on a Rebel moped and killed. Yes, one more victim. We need to ensure that we are protecting both the pedestrians and the riders in New York City. I will even go as far as saying that any moped sharing company who wishes to do business in New York City again should only be allowed to be on the road if they can guarantee that their rider will be wearing a helmet while riding a moped all the time. It's not enough to take a photo. They have to use the technology, the app today, to be sure that rider has helmets all the time. Early this year, River suspended operation in the city while they evaluated their business model. They relaunched it in late August after agreeing to enhance safety requirements by implementing new safety and rider accountability protocols that include mandatory safety training, a step to increase helmet compliance by requiring a soft fee, which is not enough, and a new community reporting tool that allows the public to report dangerous driving. It is my hope that this new safety measure will enhance the driving experience for riders and improve safety for all New Yorkers. With these safety concerns in mind, I sponsor Intro number 2061. This bill will require the Department of Transportation to establish a more clear procedure by which shared moped organization may apply for approval to operate shared moped fleet in New York City. This process will create an additional layer of safety precautions that moped organization must undergo before receiving open access to our city streets. And let's be clear with this. I have a driver's license, but even though I have a driver's license, I'm not allowed to drive a motorcycle in New York City without having a license that demonstrates that I have a skill to maneuver those vehicles. A moped is not different from a motorcycle. Therefore, anyone riding a moped, they should get some type of license in order to do business with us. The bill will also require shared moped organizations to implement safety protocol, including measures to monitor helmet use. This bill will also prohibit the unauthorized operation of shared moped fleet and provide for the impoundment of such unauthorized vehicles. I look forward to working with the administration and my colleague here at the council to pass this legislation as quick as possible. Commissioner, we are against the clock. We need to act now. Finally, during today's hearing, I look forward to receiving an update from the administration on the solicitation to create a pilot program for shared electric scooter in the city as required by local law 74 that was enacted during this summer. As of today, we know that DOT has been working with different stakeholders. I trust the leadership of the commissioner, but also we know that we were supposed to have information on the start of the solicitation by October 15th. Of course, we know that DOT has been very busy working with all the issues, such as Restaurant Street Initiative, which we've been working together. And we understand that, they have been very busy. Therefore, we would like to hear today what is the plan on the October 15th that we have not get the status of the solicitation. Before we begin the hearing, I will turn it over to the committee counsel for some procedural comments, the acknowledgement of the council member with any new one have addressed, and to administer the oath to the administration. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Deutsch and clarify that we have been joined by Councilmember Levine rather than Levin. I'll now call on members of the administration to testify. Polly Trottenberg, Rebecca Zach, Will Carey, John Frost, Michael Pilecki, and Michael Clark. I'll now read the affirmation and then call on each individual to confirm their response on the record. Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Trottenberg?
I do.
Assistant Commissioner Zach?
I do.
Will Carey?
I do.
John Frost?
I do.
Deputy Chief Pilecki?
I do.
And Michael Clark?
I do.
Thank you. You may begin your testimony when ready.
Oh boy. Okay, can you hear me now? I'm unmuted? Good.
Yes.
Good morning, Chairman Rodriguez and members of the committee. I'm Polly Trottenberg, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation, joined here today by my colleagues from DOT and NYPD. We thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of Mayor Bill de Blasio on shared mopeds and e-scooters, as well as Intro 2061. Any discussion of shared micromobility programs in New York City should begin with Citi Bike, the largest and most successful bike share system in North America, something of which we at DOT are very proud. Citi Bike has seen over 108 million rides since its 2013 launch and has had a strong track record on safety. The system now includes over 1,100 stations in 4 boroughs and a fleet of about 17,600 bikes. Let me share with you some of the key factors in Citi Bike's success, as they are very relevant to the discussion of shared e-scooters and shared mopeds. First and most importantly, Citi Bike is a public-private partnership that was designed as a public transportation system from the start. And the DNA of this approach is evident in its key features. A multi-year contract, which grants the private sector partner exclusivity and an incentive to invest and deliver results for the long term. A station-based approach with strong rebalancing, which makes the system reliable for riders and keeps bicycles locked in orderly docks that help minimize clutter and inconvenience for local residents. High safety and maintenance standards established through service level agreements and other contract terms have incentivized the operator to identify and address equipment issues before serious problems occur. Extensive community outreach through which local stakeholders work with DOT to identify the best station locations while maintaining the spacing essential to the functionality of the system. An affordable membership-based pricing that encourages frequent, regular riding and mode shifting to cycling, compared to per-minute pricing, which is geared towards discretionary trips, such as those typically taken for for-hire vehicles. And finally, required discounts for low-income New Yorkers, including NYCHA residents and SNAP recipients, that make the service even more equitable and affordable. The mutual benefits embedded in this approach and the large exclusive and potentially profitable service area have led our private partner Lyft to commit $100 million to expand and improve Citi Bike. And they're making good on this commitment, even in a time of industry uncertainty. In 2019, the Phase 3 expansion brought Citi Bike service to Bushwick and Ridgewood and has continued in 2020, despite the challenges of COVID-19, into Harlem, Washington Heights, and the South Bronx. We're also adding dramatically more station capacity through infill in the densest parts of the existing network. When phase 3 is complete, by 2024, City Bike will serve over half of New York City's population with more than 40,000 bikes. To ensure the system is equitable and inclusive, City Bike, DOT, and the Department of Health have partnered with the Bed-Stuy Restoration Corporation to form the Better Bike Share Partnership, which promotes ridership in low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. This summer, City Bike, DOT, and community partners organized rides in Upper Manhattan and the South Bronx to promote cycling, including the Tour de Heights, where the chair and I joined residents on a bike ride highlighting the history, culture, cuisine, and political activism of Washington Heights. And this spring, with generous financial contributions from longtime sponsors Citibank and MasterCard, City Bike and the de Blasio administration launched the Critical Workforce Membership Program. This program provided 19,000 free annual memberships to essential healthcare and frontline workers who've taken nearly 740,000 rides to date. So as we consider the design of shared e-scooter and moped programs in New York City, which can be a tough place to operate, as we all know, our experience with City Bike teaches us that we need committed partners with robust resources, deep management expertise, a commitment to equity, and a willingness to invest for the long haul, particularly in difficult budget times. Now let me turn to the city's shared e-scooter pilot authorized by the council in June. DOT began the solicitation process on October 6th with an industry day that was well attended with over 25 e-scooter share and related companies. We've also reached out to other cities with experience with e-scooter share programs to gather lessons learned and best practices. We're incorporating all that we learned into a request for expressions of interest solicitation for e-scooter share companies with the goal of releasing it this week. And I do apologize, Mr. Chairman, you are right. We had hoped to get it out by the deadline of October 15th, but as you point out, we've had a lot on our plates. We're gathering a lot of information. We really hope we will have the RFEI out by the end of this week. In addition, we're going to be releasing a supplementary RFEI targeted at companies that provide ancillary services to cities related to e-scooter share, such as data analysis, project management, and inspection service. For the e-scooter share companies, in their RFEI, DOT will evaluate respondents on experience, safety, operations and parking management, accessibility, equity and outreach, fair labor practices, and consumer protection. We'll also evaluate responses from a robust field of companies offering shared e-scooter support services. But then, once we have our submissions, we must grapple with the dire fiscal reality and hiring freeze that I've testified about previously, which will impact the type and scale of a pilot DOT is able to plan and manage. The greater the geographic size, number of scooters, and number of vendors, the more a pilot will demand from either agency staff or a contractor. For example, over 15 full-time DOT employees oversee bike share, and our general counsel's office, our borough commissioner's offices, and senior leadership play important roles as well. And we're nonetheless straining to keep up with all the demands of the major phase 3 expansion underway. And as you can see in the diagram in my testimony, different approaches for shared systems using city streets require extensive resources. Designated parking areas require more upfront planning and sophisticated data management and analysis, while a fully free-floating model requires more on-street inspection, vendor management, and constituent complaint resolution. Many U.S. cities are now charging flat or per scooter permit fees to defray their costs regulating scooter share operations. And some cities are beginning to explore per trip surcharges as well. As you can see in the chart in my testimony, these cities are generating significant revenue from $350,000 in San Francisco to up to $3 million in Los Angeles, the city with the largest number of scooters. There is, however, a major caveat when applying these figures to New York City. For the most part, these other cities allow scooter share in their central business districts, which are the most profitable areas in which to operate. Here in New York, scooter share is excluded from Manhattan by state law, which could impact the amount companies may be willing to pay in fees to operate. That said, New York City is a market like no other, and companies do appear very eager to operate here. While the question of resources will determine the type and scale of the pilot, I will also mention a couple of DOT's other top considerations. First, while we want e-scooter share to be a success, we do not want to hurt the continued viability of City Bike. For this reason, when designing the e-scooter pilot, we want to prioritize areas outside the current and future City Bike service area. Second, we've learned from our dockless bike share pilot and seen in other cities that a large number of operators competing in the same territory greatly increases the need for city management and oversight, and potentially makes the program's economics unsustainable. Third, we will judge respondents on accessibility, including their proposals for keeping sidewalks clear, as well as options for people with disabilities. We hope to push the industry to think creatively about e-scooter design and, if feasible, to use the pilot to test new accessible e-scooter models. Fourth, we will be looking closely at respondents' approach to safety, as well as monitoring and evaluating safety during any pilot. According to a 2019 NACTO study, shared e-scooter systems have a fatality rate 5 times higher than that of bike share systems, 0.21 versus 0.04 fatalities per million trips. Now let me turn to shared electric moped services and Intro 2061, sponsored by the chair. New York City's only current shared moped provider, Revel, started service in 2018, but dramatically expanded its service area and fleet this summer in response to COVID-19. Tragically, we then saw 3 Revel-related fatalities in a short period. Revel made the decision to pause its service in July and work with the city on strengthening the company's safety culture and practices. We reached an interim agreement which required Revel to adopt a series of new safety measures. The chairman outlined them and they're listed in my testimony as well. To date, we believe Revel is making a good faith effort to abide by the terms of the interim agreement, and we are seeing some encouraging results. The Revel crash rate in September was 50% lower than in June, when the rate peaked at about 3 crashes per 10,000 trips. The crash rate for first-time users has also declined, and helmet use has significantly increased among Revel riders. However, as the chairman noted, despite these positive trends, on September 29th, a Revel rider collided with a pedestrian at Broadway and 60th Street, and the pedestrian ultimately succumbed to her injuries. NYPD's investigation into the crash is ongoing, and DOT and NYPD continue to closely monitor Revel's operations and implementations of its safety measures. Revel service can offer several benefits to the city. Its vehicles are zero emission, it is convenient, particularly for trips not well served by transit, and it may reduce traffic by shifting trips away from for-hire vehicles. But there's no escaping the fact that moped share is in a different risk category than bike share. Since starting operations over 7 years ago, City Bike has had 2 fatalities, or a rate of 0.02 fatalities per million trips. By comparison, in a span of about 4 months, Revel has had 4 fatalities, or a rate of 1.38 fatalities per million trips. Both the interim agreement and formal regulation aim to close this safety gap, but Revel's heavier, faster, and less familiar vehicles will probably always present a higher risk profile. So in addition to requiring Revel to adhere to new safety protocols and ongoing monitoring, DOT is currently working on a rulemaking to create a formal permit process for shared moped systems. We expect to publish our proposed rule by the end of 2020 and implement the rule by early 2021. And of course, Mr. Chairman, we look forward to working with you, getting the council's input, as well as input from industry and other stakeholders as part of the public process. In conclusion, I want to thank the chair and the entire council for your continued partnership. We're in a time of unprecedented uncertainty and fiscal challenge, but we're also witnessing an exciting reimagining of our streets. We know that new micromobility options, including both e-scooter and electric moped share, could help achieve the city's transportation, equity, and sustainability goals. However, we must also grapple with the complex policy and operational questions these systems raise. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a few questions, and my colleague also has other questions. The first one is, can you and the NYPD give more details on how many crashes, injuries, and fatality have been accumulated this year on shared moped? And what details can they also share with the last one when the person also unfortunately lost her life?
I think we'll let PD both has an answer, and I know Will Carey on my team has also been tracking some of this data.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Deputy Chief Michael Pilecki. I'm the Executive Officer of the Transportation Bureau of the New York State Police Department. I can provide you with the following information regarding Revel collisions. From January 1st, 2020 through October 11th, 2020, there have been 395 collisions involving Revel scooters. 174 occurred within the borough of Manhattan. 69 occurred within the Bronx. 106 occurred in Brooklyn, and 46 occurred in Queens. From August 26th through October 11th, there were 55 rebel collisions, 25 in Manhattan, 11 in the Bronx, 14 in Brooklyn, 5 in Queens, and none in Staten Island.
Do you have by any chance the same data for electrical bike?
Yes. I can
And
tell you.
what is your assessment on the comparison? And of course, we know from the beginning that there are more crashes involving the moped, such as Rebel, than electrical bikes. So after you share with all those data, the electrical bike, if you can also do your assessment on the difference between crashes involving moped and electrical bike.
But what I can give you right now, Mr. Chairman, is since August 1st of 2019 through 12/31 of 2019, there were 406 e-bike collisions versus 2125 pedal bike or normal regular bike collisions. From the period of January 1st, 2020 through October 18th of 2020, there were 446 e-bike collisions. There were 434 e-scooter collisions for the same period, and pedal bicycles, there were 3,201 collisions.
From the safety point of view, do you believe that someone who ride a moped should also have license?
I will defer to you on that, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, obviously we want everyone to be as safe as possible on mopeds. You know, anything they can do to increase their safety would be preferable. You know, the mopeds aren't as easy as they look to operate. It's one reason I see mopeds where I live, the Rebels, and I haven't gotten on one because I don't feel like I have the skills for it. So I don't know, we have a position on whether someone should have a motorcycle license for the Rebel mopeds. I know for Class A's you do need one. But I do think people should, before getting on one, make sure they know how to operate one and understand why they're different than bikes and understand why they're different than other modes of transportation.
Amazing. And I agree wholeheartedly with what Manager Clark said. And you mentioned it yourself, Mr. Chairman. It might not be the case where people have the requisite skill set to operate that motor scooter safely.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner, I don't know if your team also from the DOT would like to share also your own data.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Will Carey. I'm the Senior Director for Special Projects at New York City DOT. Just a couple of points. The primary factors we identified that led to crashes before Revel suspended operations were time of day. Crashes were more likely to happen in the late night hours than they were during other times of day. Rider experience, the less experienced the rider was, the more likely they were to be involved in a crash. And then what we call single vehicle crashes were overrepresented. This means that crashes in which, in most cases, the rider lost control of the Revel scooter rather than collided with another vehicle. After the pause, and as the commissioner mentioned in her testimony, Revel instituted some new safety measures, and we've seen an improvement in their safety record. So the crash rate, the number of crashes per 10,000 trips has declined by 50%. We've also seen an improvement. There have been fewer crashes among less experienced riders, indicating that some of the training measures that they are taking are having a positive benefit.
When someone riding a moped is not using the helmet, who get penalty? The rider or the company?
I mean, at present, if Revel, and I know you'll be hearing from them, I don't want to speak too much for them, but At present, if they determine a rider's not wearing a helmet, I think they give them first a warning suspension and then they permanently suspend them. At the moment, the city is not doing anything to penalize Revel in those instances. We are tracking that data though, and I think that's something we'll be looking at in terms of the longer term rulemaking. What would potentially be sanctions if we see a lot of, riders not wearing helmets.
Just to piggyback on what the commissioner said, prior to their voluntary closure, Revel focused primarily on just giving monetary penalties to riders who didn't wear helmets. They've now shifted entirely to a suspension-based policy. So if you're found to not be wearing a helmet, you get a 7-day suspension. And then if you're found again, you're permanently banned from the platform. Both anecdotally and based on NYPD crash reports, we see that helmet compliance, while certainly not perfect, is significantly improved from this summer, when in some cases you saw very few Revel riders wearing helmets.
Okay. Commissioner, what does it take for a company such as Revel to come and do business in the city? Because I think that the conversation has been just about Revel, and I think this is not just about Revel, this is about mopeds. So, and Revel is the one that we have today, and of course we will hear from them, and I wish them the best luck. I think that they are providing a good services that fulfill the need that we have in our city. So nothing wrong when it comes to them or any company, any new private sector that wants to do business in the city. And I know that, everyone wants to do a good business in our city, because the whole thing is about if anyone made in New York City, then they can go through other large municipalities. So what does it take then? And this is for me coming from, at some point there have been some confusion, because when we talk about how can we, is the city the one that had the right to regulate a moped company? Because at some point, the conversation, when we started addressing this question, what we got was, well, they get licensed by the motor vehicle, therefore we are limited on how much we can regulate. So how much power or how much responsibility is in our shoulder as a city to allow a private sector such as Revel to come and do business in the city of New York? And what does it take for is the market open for anyone that buy numbers of operators to come and start renting those motorcycles in our city?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question, Mr. Chairman. And, I think a little bit of the complexity of Revel starting up in the city, and particularly in the early days, is it, like so many things in New York, it falls a little bit on the city and a little bit on the state. Revel requires its riders to have New York State driver's licenses. The vehicles are licensed, under the New York State, DMV codes. So sort of part of their operation is overseen by the state, but it is also true that the city does have, under New York State law, the ability to regulate shared transportation services like Revel. And, again, I think as I've testified before this committee, Revel started very small in New York City. They had only 68 mopeds, I think, when they first started. Over the course of this summer, that number jumped up into the several thousands, and it became clear that the city, which admittedly had taken a very light touch on Revel, we had certainly been talking to them, but we had not been regulating them in a very formal way. I think it became clear that the city was going to need to do that. The rulemaking we're working on, and one, again, Mr. Chairman, I hope we'll work with you on, will not just apply to Revel. It will apply to any company who seeks to come into New York and operate shared mopeds. But even in advance of that rulemaking, I think we've been clear, the mayor himself has been very clear, that the city retains the right to suspend operations of any company at any time who we, in terms of shared moped services, who we think is not behaving safely. That is a tool that we have right now, and one we have not exercised with Revel, because they were willing to shut themselves down this summer when we saw the 3 fatalities. But that is a tool the city retains to use it with Revel or any other company that seeks to operate here.
And I understand we cannot, answer for Rebel. They will have to answer by themselves, how they operate, but we do know. And I know that we don't expect anything less than that from you, because that's how also you have been making anyone that doing any business related to transportation accountable. So that's, that's how I can define, your leadership at DOT, always protecting the city interests. But as you say, therefore, we as a city, even though we cannot answer for Rebel, we do have the responsibility to make them accountable for defending the interests that we have as a city. So based on what they had laid out to you, anyone that is renting a moped are required to have a driver license. Is that what it is?
Yes, a New York State, yes, I think any, and if you get on a Revel, you are required to send them a picture of the license. And I think, well, again, we'll let them speak about some of the methodologies they have to verify that that's your license, that you have a safe driving record. But I think, to be fair, to go with what NYPD said, it is also true that knowing how to drive a car is not the same as knowing how to ride a moped.
Yeah.
State
Sorry.
State law requires riders of Class B limited use motorcycles, which are the type of vehicle that Rebels uses, to have a driver's license and to wear a helmet.
Yeah. And look, I was born and raised in the Caribbean, and I can tell you that moped called Pasola in DR is very popular. And if as a tourist you go to any place in the Caribbean, many different places, you know how popular those vehicles are. Mm-hmm. So I do believe and recognize that, Rebel have a great opportunity to address those safety issues that, they have to tie in order to continue expanding. I see a great future for them or anybody else that, taking into consideration every single safety issue related to what are the requirements for someone to rent a moped. By addressing that area, I think that they will have a great future here in the city and other places. But I feel that, still there's not a mechanism in place. Someone can take a photo, pull out a moped, and pass it to somebody else. Someone can take a photo, send it to the entity, and a block away, because they want to enjoy a fresh air, they will turn the helmets away. We are in the city, and I know that all of you have been in some places where you have seen someone riding a moped, in this case, Rebel, without a helmet. And I think that as we will discuss, regulation, there have to be penalty also. And penalty not to go after them, but it's about how they can incorporate the technology that we have today. There should be technology there. There should be someone in the private sector that should have an act that the moped should not be moving unless someone who is in top of the moped has the helmet. So again, I'm not asking you to say how anyone on your staff can monitor that part, but I feel that there should be, a consequences for, beside the rider, for any company that rents those vehicles, who are riding those vehicles without the helmets, there should be some penalty. So I don't want to put you in the spot, to ask you what you think, because I know that safety is a matter that is important for all of us. But I just hope that as we will discuss the bill and all the ideas that you may have, that also we address how to make not just Rebel, but anyone doing business in the city, renting those type of moped, to have everything in place not to try, not to make some progress, but to guarantee that anyone riding those mopeds should have helmet all the time. Last question before, again, my colleague, I know that they will have question, is how do you feel is the challenges that that Rebel still have in order to guarantee that riders, pedestrians, and cyclists are safe as they renting the mopeds?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I'll give a quick answer on that, and I'm sure my PD colleagues may have some thoughts too. And I think the challenge we faced, it's something we've certainly been discussing this summer, is for a service like Revel to succeed, they obviously want to have a certain number of people that can sign on and start using the service. The more I think we sort of deliberate, and I don't know that I know the answer yet about how much training we expect those new customers to have. I think one idea we're talking about in terms of our rulemaking is potentially that you would, when you became a new Revel user, you would have a probationary period where we would perhaps restrict the times of day and the geographies until you had proved yourself an able rider. But I think these are, I'll turn to PD2, where we need to keep having a dialogue. Shared moped services, I know that I've seen them down in the Dominican Republic myself, but they're still a pretty new phenomenon in this country, and certainly a very new phenomenon at scale in New York City. And I think we're still absorbing the lessons from around the world, from our sister cities, and obviously our colleagues at PD. So I'm sure PD has some thoughts here too.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that the mission of the NYPD and specifically the Transportation Bureau is to ensure the safety and security of all people who use our roadways, with particular attention to our most vulnerable road users, as you had mentioned, pedestrians and bicyclists. We use the traffic stat model, which is directly overseen by the Chief of Transportation and is modeled after the successful CompStat process to ensure that our precinct commanders, our precinct executive officers identify collision patterns, clusters, and trends in real time. And that they take appropriate measures, whether it's enforcement, engineering, or education, to address those particular collisions. So, this is something that we're going to analyze. Each week we have a traffic stat meeting in which a particular patrol borough participates. That would be the executive officer of the borough, which is the one-star chief like myself, and the precinct executive officers. They're required to make a presentation with regard to collisions in the borough and in their specific precincts. Again, they have to discuss the patterns, clusters, and trends that they've identified, and they have to present to the Chief of Transportation what measures they've taken and what measures they're going to take in the future to address those collisions.
Great, thank you. And with the electrical bike, and this is before calling my colleague, and of course DOT. You as leading the agency, Commissioner, are going to be working with the stakeholders and trying to figure out the pilot program. So what is your time frame when it comes to when do you anticipate that the selective entity, and do you see as one or do you see a multiple of those electrical being in New York, electrical scooter being in New York City? I'm sorry, yes, electrical scooter. Do you see multiple one? Do you see as one? Where do you see the challenges when it comes to the charges? What mechanism are you anticipating that you will be taking in place to be sure that we don't create situations as we have seen in other cities with multiple scooters living in the street without company being responsible for taking care of that. So can you share a little bit where we are?
Yes, happy to. And again, I just want to sort of remind the council that part of this is going to be an ongoing discussion in terms of how much sort of bandwidth and personnel and resources we have to manage a program. I know there's a hunger both, I think, from the council's point of view and from the industry to do a very big, expansive pilot, but I need to be sure that I have the personnel to do that well, to get, I think, precisely, Mr. Chairman, at some of the questions you're raising. We have talked to a lot of our sister cities about scooters. I have ridden them in a bunch of different cities. Sort of what we typically hear usually is the sweet spot seems to be around 3 or 4 operators. And again, I think here in the New York context, we want operators that are well-resourced, that are good partners, that care about equity, accessibility, and safety. We are going to work through in terms of the charging and other things. I think, if we have the resources to do it, we'll probably like to experiment with a couple of different models, maybe places where the scooters can be charged on the sidewalk, places where, we will have them perhaps be required to lock to infrastructure, have docks for them, maybe some areas where they'll be undocked. I think we're going to, again, see what kind of responses we get from the industry. And obviously, of course, be, I think in close contact and discussion with you all and other stakeholders, particularly in your districts, about what we all think makes sense in terms of the pilot parameters.
Right. I just want to, just make the recommendation. I understand that we need to work with institutions that they are well financed in order to provide the services here. But I hope that also you look at how if some of them, if you will be at the end choosing a few of them, that also having in mind that sometimes there can be one of those few that you choose that don't necessarily have the hedge fund behind, and again, no one that I have a particular interest to promote it, but, just to look at the definition of how also to create opportunity. And I understand that, at this time where we are dealing with the financial crisis of $87 billion budget, similar to what we have in 2011, we are short of funding, and we need to attract a institution that they can take care of establishing themselves and expanding. But it is have that in mind. It's a suggestion that, always look for, beside having, the kid one, that they are well financed, also to work around providing opportunity also to, again, anyone that they can approach DOT that also not necessarily has all those funding, but sometimes they are more creative, they are more community related. So it's a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, let me respond to that. And I think also if you all could unmute Will Carey, he may have an answer too. You're absolutely right. We're not only going to be looking at whether the applicants are well funded. I mean, if someone has what we think is an incredibly promising safety technology or whatever it might be, of course, we'll take that into consideration. But I think just what the experience of other cities, is that like having 10 of these different companies on the ground is sort of not feasible in terms of management for the city, and just perhaps creates more chaos than we want. So again, we will work with you all, I think, to find the sweet spot of, a good group of companies that demonstrate different technologies and different capacities, but have it be something that's also manageable. And I know, Will, did you have something to add?
No, you covered it, Commissioner.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank goodness.
Let me go back now to Elliot. And of course, like with the electrical bike, I don't want to be putting one on the spot, but I also hope that, we continue working, especially with the delivery workers community, for them not to be the target. We know that, there have been all those cases of overdue enforcement toward that sector. And I feel that especially during the coronavirus, especially the fast food or the food delivery workers, were the one that we rely on to bring food to our apartment. So let's continue working together with that sector. Again, not compromising on the safety of anyone, but to be sure that they are not the targets of enforcement. Antes de pasar, quiero decir en español de que estamos aquí sosteniendo la audiencia para analizar cómo están funcionando la industria de las pasolas, el Rebel, que son la primera que están en la ciudad. Hemos tenido algunos casos de choque donde han muerto 3 personas y queremos asegurarnos de que se tomen todas las medidas necesarias para que la compañía siga operando si tiene la seguridad resuelta. Yo he estado trabajando junto con el congresista Espaillat, ya que el norte de Manhattan ha sido uno de los lugares donde teníamos una mayor cantidad de pasolas. No estamos en contra de que las pasolas estén en la calle, pero sí necesitamos que sean seguras, que no estén en la acera, que no anden en alta velocidad y que siempre anden con un casco protector. With that, let me go back to it.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to acknowledge that we've been joined by Council Members Cohen and Levin. We'll now call on Council Members for questions in the order that they've used the Zoom raise hand function. Council Members, please keep your questions to 5 minutes. The Sergeant at Arms will keep a timer and we'll let you know when your time is up. Councilmember Reynoso will be first, and he will be followed by Councilmember Cabrera. Councilmember Reynoso.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Sergeant. I don't really know where to start, but I'm going to try my best to do this in 5 minutes, Commissioner. You mentioned 4 things that are extremely important when it comes to who you want in the city of New York when it comes to operators of these type of transportation alternatives. You mentioned a collaboration with the Department of Transportation and the NYPD, equity in where these their vehicles would be used, safety being of paramount concern for the company, and a well-resourced company. Would you say that Revel is all 4 of these? Or do they collaborate with the Department of Transportation?
Yes, I would say they have been very collaborative.
Are they equitable? Are they putting their vehicles exclusively in white affluent areas, for example?
I mean, I'd have to say no. Part of their big expansion, this Bronx, was to go up into northern Manhattan and into the Bronx. So and again, I'm not here to be the spokesperson for Revel. They're a company we've just started really to get to know this summer, and you know, I'm not going to be an endless defender of everything they do, but I do think they have tried to expand into a diversity of neighborhoods around the city.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm not asking you to be a spokesperson. I just wanted you to speak to your experience as the Commissioner of Transportation with the company. So if it's a good experience, then say it's a good one. If it's a bad one, say it's a bad one. But so far, you said that they've worked with you. They did equity in where they place their mopeds is something they do. Safety. Did the Department of Transportation impose the suspension, or did Revel impose their suspension when they saw safety concerns?
Revel voluntarily decided to take their vehicles, suspend their operations. But look, it's no secret that certainly the city, both us and NYPD and City Hall, had certainly raised a lot of concerns with them.
Right.
I've been raising those concerns over the course of the summer.
Yeah, I guess I'm not questioning on whether or not the city thought it would be prudent to shut them down. But once they saw that that was a path that we might be moving towards, they self-imposed the suspension in an effort to work with the Department of Transportation to seek solutions or creative solutions to try to figure out what they were going to do. And are they a well-resourced company? Are they a company that can survive in the market that is the city of New York?
Well, I think that's a good question, council member, and one I think you need to put to the CEO of the company, because my sense is for them at some point kind of the operational requirements that we may put on them would make it hard for the company to be financially viable. So that is a genuine question.
Yeah, and that's a big deal, right? Like the idea here is that we want to make sure that companies have a chance in New York City, and over-regulation can be what discourages or makes it financially impossible for us to have these alternatives to transportations that are not vehicles. Look, I really see Revel as a model company that they're self-imposing. They're working with the Department of Transportation. They're asking for guidance. They're moving about the city of New York with almost no legislation, but with the guidance of the Department of Transportation and the NYPD. And I think that that's exactly what we're asking for. We've seen companies like Uber come into the city with no regulation and run madhouse. And that is not what I see happening with Revel. So I really do think that we have to be very careful about what we're telling companies that are playing by the rules or doing the best they can under the circumstances that exist. And that we would quickly move to impose regulations on them as well. It took us years to even consider imposing rules on Uber, but we're quick to jump on imposing it on the moped. So I'm very concerned about that. And at this moment, I'm not a fan of any regulation related to any legislation that would impose regulations on Revel, as opposed to continuing with the work that has been done by the NYPD, by the Department of Transportation to make this happen. Requiring a helmet is something that the state requires, not the city. So no matter what happens, we can't leave this hearing mandating that licenses for motorcycles is a state law. So we're preempted by the state, and it's not something we can do. And then the asking for the Revel not to be able to start when you're wearing a helmet would be the equivalent of asking for a vehicle not to be able to start unless the seatbelt is locked in. I mean, that just doesn't happen in the city of New York. What happens is if you don't wear your seatbelt and a cop catches you, you get a ticket. You get a summons. We should be looking for the department, the NYPD, to be doing the same with people that are not wearing helmets. And I think that, again, vehicles are much more dangerous use of our city streets, or vehicles are a big problem. And we're not asking for the producer or the companies of Honda or Toyota or Chrysler or GM. We're not asking any of them to make sure that the car doesn't turn on unless the seatbelt is locked. And it's a double standard that we have when it comes to vehicles versus these alternatives to transportation. And I think that we should be very careful about what we're saying to companies that are doing everything the right way, and we're here having a hearing ready to overregulate them as opposed to vehicles. So again, thank you so much, Commissioner Trottenberg. Thank you so much to the NYPD for being here. And the CEO, by the way, I want to be clear, not a lobbyist, not a lawyer. The CEO is on this call as well, which just speaks volumes to me about like how important they think this is. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member. I gotta say that, first of all, you were one of the few council members that opposed the regulation toward Uber in 2013. When Uber came to New York City, you were one of those big champions for them. Now, a few years after, we need to recognize that we failed in 2014. I think that when we hear from a rebel, they by themselves agree that they down to continue working with better and more regulation. They know that anyone who rides a helmet should be accountable to anyone that ride a moped should be accountable to use a helmet. And they're working with us to be sure that they address that concern. People have died. Moped is not a bicycle. A moped is a motorcycle. And we need to be responsible. As we fail on Uber, we cannot fail to this company. Thank you.
Chair, Councilmember Reynoso would like to.
Yeah, I thought it would be appropriate for me to say the regulations that we were talking about for Uber were about its growth and controlling its growth, and talking about how the market has affected the taxi industry in general. The regulations we were talking about are not related to safety and whether or not they should be wearing seatbelts. So equating the two is not fair. And I don't think we should be getting into a conversation between a council member and a chair on regulations of the past related to Uber that are not necessarily the same as what we're talking about here. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. We will continue working with other colleagues. Yes, we failed to Uber and we cannot fail to this company. Thank you. Next Council Member, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've been joined by Councilmember Richards as well. Our next council member we will hear from is Councilmember Cabrera, followed by Councilmember Cohen. Councilmember Cabrera.
Time starts now.
Councilmember Cabrera, we're having trouble hearing you. We're still having difficulty with Councilmember Cabrera. we will go ahead with Councilmember Cohen and then circle back to Councilmember Cabrera if he can get his audio sorted out.
Time starts now, Councilmember Cohen.
I don't know. It says I'm not muted.
We have you now, Councilmember Cohen.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair. I got to tell you, though, I'm very concerned about the way this hearing is going. I think everybody wants to see as many modes of transportation that help New Yorkers get around, travel through the city, that reduce car congestion, like Revels, mopeds. It's all a great idea. The city does not have the infrastructure to support these, and there's no real discussion about that. I'm baffled at how we're going to just open our streets to any kind of vehicle, anything anybody wants to do, and with not an acknowledgement that the infrastructure is currently adapted for cars. Either we need to, I know there's been some discussion about the model on 14th Street, but either we need to devote infrastructure to these other forms of transportation, or it's not going to work. We could operate, it's not Revel the fault that people were getting killed. It's the disconnect between this type of transportation and the rules governing our roads that we have now. And I don't think that the city has a real plan to integrate these vehicles into the city in a safe way. Could you talk about, what you think the infrastructure needs are to make these kinds of alternate transportation safe in the city?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I'm going to take a little exception to the notion that it's all on the city, these Revel fatalities. I think a lot of what we've seen, not only with Revel, but with motor vehicle occupants and motorcycles in this pandemic period, has been a lot of bad driver behavior, speeding, things that obviously we're attempting to fix through roadway design. But I think there is some personal responsibility for those that get behind the wheels of a car, a motorcycle, a moped. But that said, council member, certainly agree. I think if we want to expand e-scooters around the city, just as we've done with City Bike, we're going to need more bike lane infrastructure. For mopeds, they're supposed to travel in the travel lane with vehicles. They're not allowed to be on sidewalks or in bike lanes. So different sets of infrastructure needs for each mode.
I know that, Commissioner, I know that's the rules now, but I don't know that that's a good model. And I don't know that you think that that's a good model, that mopeds integrated into, our car traffic makes sense. And I do understand that there is personal responsibility, but I think that if we offered people a safe, viable way, again, maybe not in automobile traffic, they wouldn't cross over the double yellow and go down the other side of the street. Do you think that it is the best policy to have these mopeds integrate, just use the same traffic lanes as cars?
I mean, yeah, I have to say, I don't think that it's sort of a feasible solution to create a whole new, right of way just for these mopeds. I think we're not a city that has that big a use of them. And I don't necessarily see evidence that they're being in the roadway has been the issue. I think the fatalities we've seen in a lot of the crashes, as Will mentioned, it's been operator error. The operator hasn't collided with a vehicle. The driver, the operator of the moped just lost control, which at least speaks to me that it is at least as important to make sure that anyone who rides one of these has some training and knows what they're doing. I certainly think on the e-scooter side, and there's been a lot of debate about this, that if we want those to be safe, it is best to have them within a bike lane. And how will e-scooters and bike lanes mix together, and can we continue to build out that bike lane infrastructure as we expand the e-scooter program? I think questions we're all going to have to solve collectively.
Can I ask, I know that the bike lane, the city started building bike lane infrastructure before your tenure, but if you had sort of a clean slate, again, having this model like 14th Street where we have car-free streets, certain do you think that might be a better model than trying to adapt? Because there's been a tremendous struggle, particularly on a bus route, to incorporate bike lanes. Do you think that this is the best model going forward?
I mean, the way we do bike lanes and bus lanes right now in New York City, no, I don't think it is the best model. I think this summer we have tried to be a little creative about it and sort of speed up the process and make it more nimble. But I also think as a city, and I think these new forms of micromobility are going to continue that dialogue. You know, we need to, I think, working with you all and the community boards, we need to come up with a more streamlined process. I mean, we DOT, we have a lot of requirements we have to follow as we do these projects. And it has, at times, I agree, made the process very slow. That said, and I know, Councilmember Cohen, this is something you care about. We also want to make sure we do have community input from community boards, from local stakeholders. I think no matter how we do it, there'll always be critics that we either move too fast or not fast enough.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I just feel like, though, that, you know, that more master planning here in terms of what our city streets are going to look like and the way New Yorkers want to use them is important. I know that, you know, the administration, you know, we're got another year left, but I just don't feel like there is a sort of big vision as to how these vehicles are going to be incorporated into our streets in a safe way. Thank you, Commissioner, for your time. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for clarity on the difference on the two topics that we are addressing on this hearing, one is related to moped, and the other one is about the bill that we had related to, you know, and the bill that we had to increase safety for anyone that will be riding a moped. And then the other part of this hearing is about the pilot project that will come out as part of the electrical scooter. So the question related to what do we expect as a definition of whoever DOT will choose to provide electrical scooter is completely different from the moped. So the moped matter that we are discussing is about what have happened to Rebel, how are they working to improve safety, and then we are at the same time in this hearing addressing and listening from DOT also, what is their plan, how they've been working in conversation with the stakeholder that want to bring services related to electrical scooter to New York City, except Manhattan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Next, we're going to go back to Councilmember Cabrera, who will be followed by Councilmember Koo. Councilmember Cabrera.
Time starts now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfectly. Thank you so much. Thank you to the chair, commissioner. I want to first thank you, Commissioner, as the prime sponsor of the e-scooter, e-bike bill back in June for all the discussions that we have, the continued dialogue as late as a couple of weeks ago as well. So thank you. Thank you for being able to have that level of dialogue, which I think is very important. I wanted to ask you a technical question first. I noticed that you mentioned the RFEI and not the RFP. Is there a particular reason why we're going with the EI instead of the RFP?
I mean, it's I think a slightly more nimble process where I think we're hoping we can do it a little quicker. We can get a broader range of responses and input from the industry. So that was just our thinking behind it.
That's great.
And I think just, again, you know, Councilmember, as I told you, having had a big industry day, there's a lot of interest. I think we are going to get a lot of great responses, a lot of creative ideas, a lot of things for us all to take a look at.
And I receive a lot of positive feedback from those who attended the event. So my compliments to you for hosting the event. I think it was a wonderful idea. Wanted to ask you, how many e-scooters are we thinking of doing through this RFEI?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, as I indicated in my testimony, it is, I think, look, obviously one dependent on what we get from the industry in terms of their proposal, although I'm just going to take a guess that they are going to propose putting thousands and thousands of scooters on the street. And then, for us, it's a management question. As I said in my testimony, obviously the city's in a difficult fiscal position. We have a hiring freeze. My agency has an 8% vacancy rate, and we've had 12% cut in our operating budget, and potentially more to come, unfortunately. And I think we all want whatever we do in terms of the pilot to be well run, to be safe, to be accessible. And so I really want to make sure that I have the personnel and the bandwidth to do that well. And that's a question I think we need to resolve in the coming months. Other cities that have done this, typically, as I said in my testimony, they charge a fee, and it gives them the resources to make sure that they can manage these programs well.
Beautiful. And let me just say to OMB, they're listening, anybody in the administration, let's fund DOT so they could do their job. We cannot continue having people move on for whatever reason and those jobs not being replaced. We need to replace them if you're gonna, not just your department, but any other department. In terms of the e-bikes, I'm sorry, the Muppets, and all the comments that were made, I want to echo Reynoso's comments. Look, at the end of the day, we're not the first city to be implementing this rideshare program. LA has successfully done it, all the cities. If they did it, we could do it. Some modal transportation. Sometimes to me it seems more dangerous walking than riding certain types of vehicles. Yes, we want to do it better, and I think the data that you provided is showing that we're moving in the right direction. I think with and this goes alongside with the e-scooters, whether any form of transportation, alternative form of transportation. The businesses today, they are facing, and we keep using this term because it's so true, an unprecedented level of pressure, of demands, of financial hardship. We need to be very, very careful that we don't do these companies down when, in fact, maybe it's an agency or a department or for that matter here, I think it's the NYPD to do the enforcement. Somebody's not wearing a helmet, give them the ticket. Sooner or later, it becomes part of the culture, just like it became part of the culture to wear a seatbelt, and now we do it automatically. So I think it's a learning process for our community, and I think one that we will learn together, and I run out of time. With that, I give it back to the chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we will hear from Councilmember Koo, followed by Councilmember Holden. Councilmember Koo.
Time starts now.
Hello, Commissioner. Yeah. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for coming to testify and all the NYPD and your staff. Now, my question is, it's really confusing to me, the terms of moped, e-scooter, e-bike, they all look, are they all legal, or how you classify each? What is a moped? What is a e-bike? And what is an e-scooter?
It's a good question, and certainly I want PD to jump in here too, because I think one of the challenges that they've been experiencing is you were describing a whole continuum of vehicles, and knowing exactly which falls into each bucket has certainly been, I think, a learning curve for New York City. Typically, and there are state definitions that classify these vehicles in terms of ridership and speeds they can attain, but for the purposes of the discussion today, we're talking about 3 different types of shared systems. City Bike, which I testified about, which has both regular, what we call classic bikes that you use your legs to pedal, and then what's called pedal assist, where it has a little electric battery that kicks in, but you have to pedal to make it happen. There is on top of that, and you're familiar with it certainly in your district, full electric bikes, where you don't need to pedal to make the bike move. Sort of next on that continuum, you come to a moped, which is, I'm going to turn to PD to make sure I get the definitions right, but it's sort of an even more robust vehicle that you don't pedal on at all. You just sit there and it can go.
And are they all legal under the New York State?
Well, they're now about to become, some of them are about to become technically legal next month. As you know, under New York State law, the state legislature and the council have passed bills, and the throttle e-bikes, the type that delivery folks use, and the e-scooters will be officially legal as of November 23rd. That said, they're certainly on our streets right now. I think we all know that.
Are they required to register with the motor vehicle department?
You will for mopeds and motorcycles. You do not for e-bikes, the type that a delivery person would use, or e-scooters.
Because I noticed recently a lot of people use these so-called e-scooters now. I guess it's easier to use and easier to store because they are much smaller. But I worry about public safety because a lot of these people, when they use the e-scooter, they ride on the sidewalks. And a lot of elderly people are afraid because I saw a couple of times they almost hit people. So imagine you ride an e-scooter, you hit an elderly people, senior citizen, and he or she fell, they will suffer tremendously physical damage. And if you're hit by a car has insurance. But if you're hit by a moped or by e-scooter, they don't have insurance. And whoever hit by them, you suffer because you not only suffer physical damage, but also emotional and financial damage. That's one thing I want to emphasize is how the city can regulate these people when they use these so-called electronic devices. Right now, we don't have any enforcement. NYPD is short-staffed. This is like not a higher priority for them. By what I see on downtown Flushing is a lot of these either e-scooters or moped, they ride on the sidewalks, or if they ride on the streets, they drive the opposite way, against the traffic. And it's really dangerous for them, and it's also very dangerous for the public. So this is the point I want to raise is public safety. I think the city government's basic job is to provide public safety for all people.
Thank you, Councilman. Let me respond to that, and I know PD will want to as well. And just to be clear, cars, motorcycles, and mopeds are regulated at the state level. They do have license plates and they are required to. Maybe there are some cases where people are acting illegally. They're required to register, have license plates, and insurance. And that is the case with Revel. All their scooters have a license plate, and Revel is insured. You are correct, though, for electric bikes and electric scooters, those requirements don't exist. And I think this is what PD can talk about, how we deal with that from an enforcement point of view. It can be a challenge.
Right.
So, but I know that you can buy all these things on by mail order by Amazon, for a few $100s or to a couple $1,000. You can depends on how fast or how fancy this is. I don't think they need registration because when you buy a car, you need to register first before they take your money, right? They do it on the same time. But when you buy a moped, anyone can buy a moped by mail. There's no registration for it.
Yeah, and Councilman Ku, there is registration for mopeds. So I think that is, it's right. Whether there's registration or not is regulated by state law. And state law is what has created the classes of e-bikes, classes of e-scooter, the classes of, they call it limited use motorcycles, but mopeds. So it is something that's regulated by state law. And you're right, for the e-bikes and the e-scooters, you don't need to register and you don't need insurance for it. There is in state law a violation if you're riding an e-scooter and you collide with someone and you leave the scene. There are violation and misdemeanor penalties for that. So you are supposed to be staying on the scene, and there is an avenue if you stay on the scene for, the person can initiate litigation if they are civil litigation if they are injured. But Commissioner Trottenberg is right. There is difficulty in enforcing these, and specifically what is legal and isn't is going to be a big challenge for our officers. Now, if someone's riding on the sidewalk and an officer sees it, they should be issuing citations. If they're riding the wrong way, there should be citations issued. So in terms of that, if an officer sees it, and obviously our officers aren't everywhere, and I live in the city too. I have seen bikes on sidewalks and scooters on sidewalks, and I've seen it too going the wrong way. So, and if the officer's not there, it won't get enforced. But if an officer sees it, they should be taking enforcement on those things.
But my problem is I don't see many policemen on the street now. So it's really hard for police to enforce the law if they're not there. I mean, you cannot call 311 or 911 because by the time or somebody is riding on the sidewalk, because by the time they come, the rider is already gone, long gone. So how do you improve enforcement on these people riding on the sidewalks or against the traffic?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so, as we mentioned earlier, Councilman, 311 complaints do come into precinct commanders, and they are responsible to have their officers respond and conduct an investigation as to whether or not it's a one-time incident or whether it's a pattern, an ongoing situation. And they are responsible to address those types of complaints that way. At Traffic Stat, as I mentioned before, we also run the 311 complaints, and we discuss them with the precinct executive officers to make sure they're being properly addressed. As Mike Clark said before, we can't have officers everywhere at the same time, but certainly it's something that we stress at Traffic Stat, these types of complaints.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember. So, just to be clear, so is a moped a motorcycle based on the state law, or is it an electrical scooter?
I think it is. It's more like it's considered, and Michael Clark will correct me, it's considered a Class B limited use motorcycle. That's the legal, and they are required to be registered with the state and be insured, and that's what Revel uses.
So just so as we follow conversation, just to be clear that as we are addressing and listening for you on your plan on how to work with the stakeholder and bringing an electrical scooter to Manhattan, to New York City, except Manhattan, as it was passed at the state, we are not talking about moped. That part is related to electrical scooter. I just want to be clear that everyone know that there's two different conversations that we are having today. One is addressing moped, and yes, one person who died is too many, and there already has been 3. And yes, we are not blaming the institution who is doing business. Anyone is responsible, but anyone who decided to do business, to establish in the city of New York, need to take all the precautions and the safety in place in order to go and rent those vehicles and have them in the street. And I know, as we were here from Revel, I know that they're working with you, and I don't know, Commissioner, if you also can add to that, because I feel that this is not about that Revel want to do something different. I think that they've been open and they understand that to have the tool in place so that everyone will a helmet all the time is a mandate that they need to follow from the state law and from the city of New York.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll certainly let them speak to that. And just, I think, to add one more thing to what Councilmember Koo was saying, again, just to emphasize part of the challenge here, and you're hearing it from PD, there really is a continuum, because I think some of the, what we would call the throttle electric bikes, they almost appear to be mopeds in some cases. And, what the council member is saying is true. You can order a lot of pretty powerful machines online. So, there's certainly, it is a very complicated marketplace. And I know between us and PD, we're trying to do our best to stay on top of it. But I think as Michael said, it's a challenging area. It's a challenging area for enforcement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Councilmember Holden. Councilmember Holden.
Time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Nice to see you again. And I want to thank the chair for this important hearing. I have to agree with my colleagues, Council Members Cohen and Koo. I'm very, very concerned about almost like there's now a free-for-all in the city with all these vehicles, and it's very confusing, like Councilmember Koo mentioned. But let me just get to mopeds and even like the Rebel type moped. The skill set, as I think the chair mentioned, is very different than driving a car, because I've done both. I've driven a car, again, since I was late teen. I rented a moped in Bermuda and crashed a number of times. And that was 25 years ago. And because it is more dangerous, different skill set, totally. So if I have a driver's license, I should have a license to drive a motorcycle, because I have a skill set to drive a motorcycle or a moped. So I think we have to move in at the state is going to have to figure this out, because we need to have people trained on driving something like a Revel or a moped, because it's a very different skill set. And that's why you're seeing accidents. And that's why you're seeing the police officers mentioned the number of accidents. So, but Commissioner, a bigger question. We are trying to get New York City residents to ride public transportation, right? So why encourage more dangerous modes of transportation in New York City?
I mean, it's a good question, Councilmember, and I think it's a balancing act. And I think you're hearing that from your colleagues here today. You know well that not every part of the city is well served by mass transit, and some of these sort of micro mobility modes, as we call them, can, both serve areas that are not well served by mass transit, or just work on trips, let's say a crosstown trip in Manhattan, where it's a lot easier to hop on a bike than it is actually to try and take the subway over. So I think they fill a niche, but I think part of our discussion today, obviously, is these modes of transportation, I think, are very popular, but there's no question making them fit into the sort of the dense, complicated streets of New York. It presents, as you're hearing today, I think, an enforcement challenge for all of us. And I think there's not a one size fits all, particularly when it comes to the scooters. I think we're very much, I know when you all had the vote and discussed it, some of you were very excited about having scooters in your districts and some wanted no part of them. So we may have different solutions in different parts of the city.
All right, so that's where you might come in and say, all right, we'll put these e-scooters in areas that are not served very well by public transportation, to balance it out possibly, and not allow them in very congested areas where they're endangering everyone. Because you've seen it, everybody has in New York City, and even the proponents of all these modes of transportation know it, that the vast majority of people on these little scooters and even, all different types are not abiding by traffic regulations. You see it, a light, delivery guys are going through it. We see it every day. They don't have a license plate. I think there's a bad mix. And, some of my colleagues who voted to defund the cops, the NYPD, it's interesting to hear them say they want the cops to enforce helmets or other things that the people riding Rebel are doing. So the cops are not. The cops can't do everything, especially monitor every little mode of transportation that's riding on the sidewalk illegally. It's impossible in New York City, especially with all the different modes of transportation. But we are going to have to have a really serious discussion on really keeping us safe, but also monitoring anybody going 30 miles an hour on a moped and has no license plate. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. And I've seen it. They're riding in bike lanes. Obviously, you can't see them. Some of them have the lights are not apparent. It's not lit very well. And I think even in the early days of Rebel, I counted, and I have video. Early days of Rebel, I saw, and it's in the hot summer, I saw more people not wearing a helmet than people wearing a helmet. Now it's changed because maybe the weather has changed too. But I think to ask the cops, ask the police to enforce something that's out of control. And then, you know, we don't have enough officers is ludicrous. But I think we need a serious discussion on organizing all of this, Commissioner, and really get to the heart of how do we make our city, yes, viable in transportation, but let's encourage public transportation. Let's talk about that more seriously than all these different other modes. Even if they're popular, still, it's creating a free-for-all out there. And I've, as somebody that gets around New York City, I've seen people come from all different directions now, riding these either e-scooters or mopeds, all different directions. You used to know where motor vehicles were or are. Now you don't in New York City. Thank you.
I don't know, maybe if PD particularly wants to address, I think some of the council members.
Well, I'd like to just ask NYPD if they do. I know they impound some vehicles, some that are riding on sidewalks, and somebody doesn't have an ID. Do we have a number of how many vehicles were impounded, whether e-scooters, mopeds, or otherwise?
Councilman, I can provide you with some information regarding the enforcement the NYPD has taken regard to rebel operators. Interesting that since January 1st of this year through October 18th of this year, we've issued 1,089 moving violations to the operators of rebel scooters. What's interesting to note is just about half of that number were for operators not wearing their helmets. I can tell you that that's about 540. There were 141 issued to operators who proceeded through steady red lights, 71 for operators who disregarded traffic control devices, 58 operating in a bike lane, 96 unlicensed operators. So that means that they didn't even have the basic, Class D license that's required to operate an automobile. So, we do take enforcement in these cases. I don't have any statistics on impounded vehicles here right now, but we can certainly work on getting that.
Thank you.
And as you know, back in March, we did issue a finest message telling people not to enforce purely against the operator of an e-bike who's otherwise complying with the VTL rules as sort of a COVID exception, and that's still in place. And then our ability to seize will be many of these bikes will now be legal beginning next month. I think what you'll see from most delivery workers will be legal under the new rules. So I think it has been significantly fewer than it had been, and it may go down even further once all of these are legal, and the rules around when we're allowed to impound them has changed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And as a reminder, we do agree when it comes to everything that you say about the challenges that we have, and we know that Rebel, City Bike, they play important role adding their services in Northern Manhattan, and especially around the hospital, the essential workers that they needed, those motor transportation during the coronavirus. And they also understand that we have to continue making them safer. When it comes to enforcement, we cannot decrease our expectation. We also know that the men and women in NYPD, through all the local precincts, I can talk about the local one, 33rd, 50, 34 here in Northern Manhattan, and also in Riverdale, everyone, we need to continue working together to be sure that no one is riding a moped in the sidewalk, that no one is going in different direction, that no one is riding a moped without having a helmet. So those are challenges that we have, and we know as New Yorkers, we will address it. When it comes to, that part related, how can the NYPD continue doing the enforcement? Yes, we need to be sure that that's happening. And it doesn't matter if the budget had to be reduced. We reduced funding to DOE, $500 million. We reduced funding for the Department of Health, close to $500 million. We reduced funding for sanitation. We reduced funding for DYCD, from Park, because the budget that we have today is only $87 billion when we end the budget that we have in June 30, which was $97 billion. So all agencies today are operating with the same budget that we have in 2011. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any other council members that would like to ask questions of the administration? Okay, if there are none, we will next turn to public testimony. Okay, I'd like to remind everyone that unlike our typical council hearings, we will be calling individuals one by one to testify. Each panelist will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please begin once the sergeant has started the timer. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call on you after the panelist has completed their testimony. For panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant at Arms will give you the go-ahead to begin upon setting the timer. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. Our first panelist will be Frank Rieg. But Chair, is there anything you wanted to add before we get started? Before the administration?
No, we should also swear the new representative from Rebel, and as part of the procedure, this is the entity that also they're doing business, you know, as they negotiated the operation in the city of New York. But before that, thank you to NYPD and DOT for being a partner, addressing challenges that we have, to continue adding new way of transportation. I support electrical scooter, I support electrical bike, I support moped, but I feel that we first had to take care of all the safety matter related to the operation in our city.
Thank you, Chair. First, as I mentioned, we'll hear from Frank Rieg, and you can testify when ready.
Time starts now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Rieg. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Revel. And thank you to the Committee on Transportation for the opportunity to testify today.
Frank, before you continue, don't limit it on the 2 minutes. So if you need to take more time, feel free to expand so that you can finish your full testimony.
I appreciate that, Chairman. I may take you up on that and take another minute or two. So I appreciate that. Revel was founded in 2018. We started with 5 employees working out of a small storefront in Bushwick, and initially launched a free floating moped share pilot with 68 electric mopeds across 3 Brooklyn neighborhoods. Today, Revel serves over 400,000 New Yorkers across 4 boroughs. Our team has grown to more than 300 employees, from engineers to field technicians, who have all access to the same exact benefits I do as CEO. We train and hire talented New Yorkers, and let me emphasize that we do not do the gig economy and never have. Revel has always believed in working with cities as allies, not adversaries. We've made this a priority from the start, and have meeting with the DOT, council members, including many of the members on this committee, local police precincts, and other community stakeholders since before our 2018 pilot, and continue to do so. COVID affected all aspects of life here in the city, including transportation. When quarantine was lifted this summer, we saw a rash of reckless driving across all modes in New York City. In July 2020 specifically, traffic fatalities spiked 300% compared to July 2019, again across all modes, cars, trucks, and 2-wheeled vehicles. The abrupt and extreme change in driver behavior was unprecedented, and just as DOT and law enforcement faced this challenge, so did us at Revel. To date, Revel has been operating since 2018 across 7 major cities, including Miami, Washington, D.C., Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, and Austin, serving over 3 million rides with over 10 million miles traveled. For over 2 years, we had relatively infrequent reports of riders violating traffic rules and not wearing helmets. Suddenly, the reverse was true this summer. We immediately began working internally and talking to the administration, but with the situation escalating so quickly, we decided to pause service in August and devote all of our engineering and operational resources to finalize the enhanced safety protocols, as discussed earlier by Commissioner Trottenberg. Since resuming service, we have seen a significant increase in helmet compliance and decrease in reckless riding, and our crash rates have returned to pre-COVID levels, as Will Carey mentioned earlier in the testimony. We have invested heavily in bolstering our lessons program, and I've been working with DOT to fine-tune all of our training materials, including developing a brand new instructional video that will also be a part of all mandatory user onboarding training. We're proud of what has been achieved to date, but we are also aware there is no silver bullet for traffic safety. In order for the city to achieve Vision Zero, companies like Revel absolutely need to do our part. For us, this means taking a thoughtful, results-driven approach and adapting as conditions on our streets change, like we did this past summer. We take our responsibility of operating the public right-of-way seriously and will continue to improve and adapt as long as we are operating. We look forward to DOT promulgating rules to regulate mopeds and participating in the CAPA process. In the interim, we will continue to be a good and transparent partner at all times in furtherance of the administration, the council, and Revel's shared goal for a safer and more equitable transportation network across New York City. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. And as I said before, good luck as you continue expanding what you started here, as you say, with few people, you know, with great talent in our city. And we don't want or wish anything less that this company to be a successful one, only here, but throughout the nation and throughout the world. So I feel that when we address areas where we need to work together to improve safety, it has to be taken as something that the company, when any conversation that we have with you, you agree that there's still challenges that we have. So first question is, what do you think that someone who ride a helmet, a moped should wear a helmet?
So Chairman Rodriguez, just to be super clear with everybody on this call, wearing a helmet while riding a Class B moped, which is a motor vehicle under state law, and every single Revel has a license plate and is fully insured. Under state law, to ride that vehicle, you have to wear a helmet. It is state law. So that is just first and foremost. Since we launched in 2018, we have always provided 2 DOT-approved helmets on every single Revel for riders to use. And since our relaunch at the end of August, we have put into place industry-leading technology in terms of a helmet selfie before every single ride. And Chairman, just to emphasize, this isn't a helmet selfie before maybe your first ride and then your 10th ride and then your 20th ride. This is every single time you ride Revel. And when there's a passenger, they also need to take a helmet selfie as well. And then these aren't just going into some black box of some company and never looked at. Every single one is reviewed. And to date, Councilmember Rodriguez, I know you mentioned accountability and responsibility when it comes to helmet use and companies like us. We have permanently suspended, since we relaunched, several thousand paying customers that will never use Revel again because they didn't take our rules seriously on wearing a helmet. So I think we are doing our best to change rider behavior. And I think from multiple folks on this call so far, anecdotally and also just real data from NYPD and traffic enforcement, it's working, which is great to see.
So wait, are you working with some tech company to address and you know how to guarantee that whoever ride a moped as you continue growing will have a helmet all the time?
So Chairman Rodriguez, again, let's play something out here. You're a user, you start your Revel ride, the helmet case opens, you go into the helmet case, you put the helmet on, you are then asked in the app in the start process of that ride to then take a photo of that helmet secured on your head and strapped in. We then review that photo. If that user then willfully takes that helmet off at some point during the ride and puts it back in the helmet case, that is going to be something extremely hard to control. What we are trying to do, and I mentioned this just a minute ago, is again, change user behavior, which I think since our relaunch, we have really made good progress. Because I think anyone on this call back in June and July, as this city was coming out of quarantine, and as I mentioned during the testimony, sort of there were a lot of changes in terms of street safety in general, way beyond Revel. The amount of helmet compliance was something I don't think anybody was satisfied with. But I think we are getting to a point now through our technology, through the helmet selfie, through our compliance and checking every single one. And guess what? We are permanently suspending users that do not take it seriously. We are getting to a place where we are in a much better position than we were 2 or 3 months ago, which I'm really excited to report.
Isn't the technology already? It's like when, and I'm pretty sure they, it's like the whole community of tech, share information. It's like when you order an Uber and you get to see when your car is approaching your location. Isn't there a technology already that can monitor someone riding a moped and knowing where is someone remove the helmet from their head?
So in terms of technology of seeing an Uber on your app and understanding where that car is, we absolutely use that same technology. It's GPS technology, it's proven, it's in every single Revel as well. And you see on our app where every single Revel is.
Can the technology also, is there technology there also outside there, or have you been talking to someone in the tech community that will allow for you as a company to monitor and be able through the app to be sure that when someone removed the helmet?
Yep. So as part of our process and our pause suspending service this summer, every single one of my engineers, every single one of my product managers, every single one of my operations team, we spent every single resource surveying the market from a technology perspective. Sensors that supposedly go into helmets. We talked to all sorts of startups and different companies in that space. We talked to companies about a camera on maybe the front of the Revel, both looking out and inward at the person. We looked at every technology solution, Chairman Rodriguez. With a fleet of with 3,000 mopeds here in New York City and over 6,000 nationally, with the integration of hardware and software, there is no magic sensor out there in the marketplace that is ready to be used in a service like ours. Where is that sensor getting power from? How is that sensor sending data to us? How is it reliable? What happens about the 10 to 20% of Revel users that use their own private helmet? So once you start looking at all of the technology out there, from helmet case sensors to helmet sensors in the helmet itself, to video cameras on the Revel itself, nothing is ready, Chairman Rodriguez. But what I can tell you is that Revel, we're not sitting here saying we are perfect. We're not going to sit here and rest on our laurels and say what we've done on safety, that's it. We are constantly pushing the envelope in every single facet of our business to increase safety. And if there is a helmet sensor a year from now that is available on the market that can realistically and is reliable and can be put into a system that makes sense, and also the 10 to 20% of people that use their own helmet, there's a way to sense whether they're wearing a helmet, we will do that, Chairman Rodriguez. But right now, the technology, the way it is, helmet selfie is the most innovative thing that our company can do. And the best thing is, it's not just a talking point, Chairman. We are changing behavior. This is real. People see it in the streets. The amount of folks wearing helmets while riding Revel has exponentially increased since the summer. And that is, if there is something I'm proud about, that is one of them.
So the good thing is about that you have your engineer to be looking at it, and that you open to, insert, some type of sensor if the product will be available, at some point. And this is something that you understand that at some point we need to do to the best of our ability to be able to monitor that whoever is riding a moped, in this case, your one Revel, they should have a helmet all the time.
I just want to emphasize again, there is no technology right now. There is no magical sensor. It does not exist that can be put into a Revel moped that also works across our entire system. It does not exist. What does exist that my team created, I can tell you right now, Chairman Rodriguez, there is no kick scooter company, there is no e-bike company that makes a user take a photo of the helmet strapped on their head before every single ride, and then checks that photo, and then suspends users, paying users, if they do not follow the rules. No company is even touching any of that.
I get what you said. You have now found a product by you opening, if anyone is listening to this hearing right now, in anyone from the Silicon Valley to here in the city to other places, they will come with a product that fits your company to bring a sensor. This is something that you see the benefit of installing that technology.
I would love to have that conversation with any new technology in the marketplace, because if it's going to increase the safety of our system, of our users, I am all for it.
That's for me, that's, you know, the common area that for me, it is important that we know that this is, you know, I understand that the tech is not there yet, but if anyone is there, they should have a conversation with you. So I appreciate that approach. And what have you learned after those crashes where some people have lost their life riding the moped?
What I have seen and what I have learned since
I mean,
our
you the
relaunch.
company. Sorry, I'm sorry, and I meant the institution, or you as a person. Say, you know, how have a Revel change and still continue to adopt, and what new changes should we still expect to happen in the near future to continue improving safety?
One example of that, Chairman Rodriguez, is the work my team is doing right now with the Department of Transportation around designing a new instructional video. Because just to be clear, as outside of the helmet selfie, one of the other things that we have implemented when we relaunched on August 28th here in New York City, and it doesn't matter if you had used Revel 1,000 times, 100 times, or just once, you were not able to ride again until you took a 42-question safety training that was mandatory within the app. 42 questions. And what we've learned is that when people are going through that safety training, when people are taking that helmet selfie, we're seeing real change out in New York City on the streets in terms of rider behavior, in terms of helmet usage. And then in terms of, again, just going back to maybe your original question here around what are we doing to continue to improve? One of the things is working with DOT on revamping that instructional video, getting guidance from their team on what they want to see in it, revamping some of the questions that we ask as part of that 42-question safety training. So these are things that we're constantly improving in partnership with the DOT.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Frank. Are there any other council members that have questions for this panelist? Okay, seeing none, we will next call on Paul Vizcaino. Paul?
Time starts now.
Thank you. Let me, great. Can everybody hear me?
We do.
Great. Thank you. My name is Paul Vizcaino, and I'm the Chief Development Officer and founding member at Wheels, a micromobility company based in Los Angeles, where I lead government relations. Given the importance of socially distanced and sustainable forms of transportation as New York continues to responsibly reopen, we feel strongly that there has never been a better time to bring micromobility to the city of New York. Wheels is excited to express our strong interest in partnering with the city of New York to offer micromobility service that emphasizes safety, cleanliness, accessibility, and equity. It is important to emphasize that Wheels is one of the only potential operators that does not use a traditional stand-up scooter. Instead, we use a seated device that has all the advantages of a bike and more. As a matter of fact, we just won the highly contested Seattle RFP for free-floating scooters with our seated device, and we received the highest score. I'd like to briefly go through some of the advantages of our device. First, safety. Wheels' mission and the reason we are founded is all about bringing increased safety to micromobility. Because of our seated form factor, our device offers a low center of gravity and 5 points of contact between the rider and the device. We also use large 14-inch wheels to better handle uneven pavement surfaces. And we are the first and only operator that uses a smart helmet system that is directly integrated into the device. As a result of these unique features, Wheels injury rates are exponentially lower than those reported for traditional stand-up scooters. We have provided staff with a third-party safety report that documents this. Next is accessibility. The reality is that many people simply don't have the physical ability to ride a traditional stand-up scooter, or would prefer not to use one. Wheels' seated form factor solves this problem, which is why we have such a broad and diverse demographic. We are extremely proud that, unlike other scooter companies, half our riders are women and 1/3 of our riders are the age of 35 and older. Excuse me? Oh, time.
You may finish.
If I may finish, point being is we actually have sensors in our helmet system. So basically, if folks wanted to, and I can talk to, I'm happy to also speak with Revel afterwards. I think they've done a great job. If we can assist with these sensors within our helmet system, we know when a rider is actually using our helmeted device, our helmet, and when the helmet is actually put back in its holster. But with that said, I wanted to let you know that something that we hope that New York City thinks about when the RFP comes out later this week is requiring that a seated device be chosen, given the broad studies that have been detailing the safety and accessibilities of seated devices. And then secondly, we think that every scooter company should provide a helmet. Not that a helmet is mandatory for folks to ride, but at least provide that helmet. You know, it'd be silly for cars. We don't even think of cars providing, their vehicles without seatbelts. We feel the same should happen in micromobility. With that said, I'm here to offer any questions, and answer any questions, and we're excited to potentially participate in the pilot program. Thank you so much, and thank you to DOT for putting together the RFP.
Thank you. Can you elaborate a little bit on the integration of helmet that you said? So do you use sensor? Is it, and this is about collaborating. So if there's something that you're already being able to find to integrate it, and how does it work? So probably this is something that you should follow conversation with Frank too, from Revel.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically the helmet, and by the way, I submitted an email that details all of this to the whole committee, as well as photos. But basically the helmet sits on the rear fender of our device. And in order to start the device, in our app, it asks you if you would like to release the helmet. You say yes, the helmet is released. The helmet comes with 30 biodegradable hygienic inliners that you peel off for each ride. So you're not touching, especially in a time of COVID, you're not touching somebody else, a place on the helmet where somebody else touched. And we actually offer incentives of 20% discounts for people who use the helmets. And the reason we're able to do that is and tell that people use the helmet is because the sensor lives within the helmet and it communicates with the app that the helmet is being used. At the end of each ride, the driver of the rider puts the helmet back in the holster in the rear fender, locks it up, and like many micromobility companies, you do a selfie to show that you're properly parked. But we are able to determine, because of the sensor, that the helmet is back in this holster, and the rider ends its ride.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that, and that's one thing that I, of course, is not that I don't trust what we heard from, but for me, a little bit surprised that they have not found the technology to put a sensor where the helmet, the information is communicated when someone had the helmet in the head with the app that the company should be able to have. So hopefully, again, you can have a conversation with them and see how we can collaborate. But thank you, and good luck as you also are trying to come to the city.
Thank you, committee, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions for this panelist? Okay, seeing none.
You know what? I was just going to mention, if I may, just because we were talking about it, we actually, and it's all in your emails, we have, we also included self-cleaning handlebars. It's called nanoseptic technology that's activated by UV light. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but again, something that I would require of potential winners of the RFP is, of course, safety, sustainability, equity, and cleanliness of the devices given COVID. Thank you.
And where do you charge the scooter?
Sure. We are market rate. So basically it's typically $1 to unlock. Sometimes we run free to unlock programs, and it's about 20 to 30 cents per minute. We also have an equity program where these prices are severely discounted for those that need special assistance and with respect to financial needs and so forth.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from other council members? Okay, next we will call on Siddharth Saxena. Siddharth.
Time starts now.
Great. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee and other attendees. My name is Sid Saxena, and I'm founder and CEO of White Fox Scooters, the first fully dock-to-dock or station-based e-scooter operator in the US. Being locally based, we believe that an e-scooter pilot program would be a valuable first step towards increasing mobility options for New Yorkers who need it most. Because of the ease of implementation, e-scooters can efficiently and immediately extend transportation options to transit deserts and currently underserved communities. These transit deserts have difficult access to public transportation or rideshare, and in some cases, residents of these areas must travel 3 or more miles to access a single subway line. Additionally, with the dock-to-dock approach, physical infrastructure can be installed in these areas to ensure consistent rebalancing, resulting in a reliable and consistent transit option into the downtown area. Additionally, not every New Yorker is fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work from home, and many times it is the lower income populations that have jobs requiring their presence in the workplace. Not only would an e-scooter pilot program extend the reach of transportation options, but it would also allow these workers a COVID-19 friendly alternative to public transportation. We believe an increase in sustainability is also another reason why we are excited by the committee's interest in an e-scooter pilot program. A study recently released by the city said that air pollution in New York over a period of just a few months caused hundreds of hospitalizations and emergency room visits. Of course, e-scooters won't immediately solve the problem of air pollution, but they will help. The electricity required to charge an e-scooter emits only 1.6% of the carbon emitted by a car over the same distance traveled. An e-scooter pilot program is the city's chance to see how different vendors approach different problems. And part of the White Fox Scooters mission is to reduce environmental impact. The sustainability advantages with a dock-to-dock approach include less vehicle miles traveled by CO2 emitting vehicles, less theft and vandalization that results in increased useful lives of the vehicles themselves, and less pedestrian safety and traffic hazards, along with better ADA compliance. And to conclude, White Fox Scooters fully supports an e-scooter pilot program and truly believes that a dock-to-dock model or a station-based approach similar to City Bike could greatly serve the layout of our home here in the greater New York City area. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well, what about the same question related to the helmets?
Yes, so my colleague Matt Thornburg is also going to be testifying and is going to mention more about this in his testimony, but we have actually redesigned our physical signage at each and every docking station that now will have hand sanitizing wipes at each and every station, as well as helmets integrated into a built-in helmet locker. So helmets are very easily accessible by each and every rider, completely free of charge, as long as they return it back to the next station. So helmets are a really important part of our integration as well.
But as you hear from the preview person, are you also expected to use technology that will allow to monitor that someone who rented the helmet, if you are choose to be one of those that participate in the pilot project, will have the helmets all the time?
Yes, so the first major step that we took, a lot of the dockless operators, as you know, Chairman Rodriguez, in order to get a helmet, you have to go online, pay for shipping, wait for the helmet to come in and be delivered, and then hope to remember it on your spontaneous scooter ride. However, with this, with having helmets at each and every docking station very conveniently accessible, you'll be much more ready and willing to be able to use those helmets. You know, unlike a moped where helmets are by state law required, helmets are, are recommended, but not required for electric scooters. So as of now, we haven't had to integrate some of those more advanced helmet selfies or sensors, but we'd absolutely be interested. We've been following some of the other vendors as well, like Wheels and others, to see that technology and see when there's an appropriate time to be able to implement that in our technology as well.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this panelist? Okay, seeing none, our next panelist will be Matt Thornburg. Matt.
Time starts now.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Matthew Thornburg, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at White Fox Scooters. We sincerely thank you for your time and the opportunity to testify. So to begin, we at White Fox encourage and support the adoption of an e-scooter pilot program because it is a sensible first step in the direction of bringing micromobility to New York City. First, a pilot program is an ideal first step because it allows the city to test the solution and confront real data to decide whether this is a good option for New Yorkers. Moreover, a pilot program not only tests the solution itself, but the vendors too, as I believe Commissioner Trottenberg alluded to earlier. Each vendor will bring unique attributes to the table, and specifically, as Sid just mentioned, for White Fox Scooters, that means the use of docking stations to lock and charge our scooters and keep sidewalks clear and organized. A pilot program allows the committee and everyday New Yorkers to experience the solution and different possibilities within that solution firsthand. And importantly, not only can you test the solution, but a pilot program allows the city to improve the solution. In conversations White Fox has had with other local governments that have implemented pilot programs, they've reported a massive increase in their knowledge of e-scooters and their future approaches to micromobility. For example, we recently spoke with local governments who found that much of their problems stemmed from rides occurring too late and in certain areas. And of course, naturally, there will be initial growing pains, but a pilot program illuminates exactly that type of data that can lead to improvement. And of course, there's the obvious point that a pilot program is only temporary and impermanent. A pilot program provides data, real feedback from citizens, and points to improve, while at the same time preserving the city's flexibility. And I'd like to briefly discuss safety and relevant to the current state of affairs. Socially distant forms of transportation are at a premium right now. And at the same time, we want to avoid increasing automobile traffic, and an e-scooter pilot program can do just that. They're an obvious solution when it comes to... May I quickly wrap up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
As far as safety, White Fox in particular, in light of COVID, is actually outfitting our scooters with self-sanitizing handlebar grips, the one that Paul just mentioned earlier, and installing sanitary wipes at each and every one of our docking stations to allow riders to sanitize their scooter before each and every ride. So not only can a pilot program provide a socially distant alternative to transportation, but concrete steps can also be taken to make sure it's sanitary. And finally, as Sid mentioned, one of the major benefits of our model using docking stations is that we have physical infrastructure, and we've now been allowed to adapt to COVID and actually redesigned them to include helmet lockers that would allow riders to conveniently rent a helmet free of charge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So with that, we're coming to the end of this hearing. And as we also ask the other participants, we also want for you to continue looking at the need to address the issue related to helmet. And again, this is a moment in our life where we have to bring innovation, where we have to be creative, where we need to, continue supporting any new mode of transportation, being electrical scooter, electrical bike, moped, the new way of how people are moving around, especially dealing with transportation desert. But the safety will always be a top one. So good luck as you again are also trying to participate, and thank you. And with that, we come into this end, and now this hearing is adjourned.